Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Healing Home. I'm your host, Michelle, and I'm really happy to be here. And I'm happy you're all here because I'm really excited because I'm having my friend Sean or SB Alger on tonight, and we're gonna get into the nitty-gritty of sovereignty and the self and the importance of these issues and some of the other concepts that Sean has brought to my attention over the years that I've gotten to know him. Specifically, a thing called communitarianism, which for people who don't know what that is, we're going to get into that, and I'm going to allow Sean to expand on all that he knows. But when this concept first came into my frame, and I realized how it affects all of us and where it is in our scope on a social level and throughout history, it kind of blew my mind. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and also Sean's work as a release coach. And so Sean, he's a talented visual artist, a musician, he's a trained release coach, he's a fellow weaving spider, and an overall stellar human being. And I am just seriously so honored that he was willing to come on and talk with me tonight. And so without further ado, help me in welcoming Mr. Sean Alger. Hey, Sean. Oh, you're muted.
Oh,
okay. We got you.
All right, here I am. Thank you so much.
Going?
What an honor. What a great introduction. I feel almost embarrassed. Am I that exceptional? I guess I've worked hard to do stuff, so I guess you know how it is. But I love you, and I'm really pleased to be here on your show. I felt like when we met in person, it was like instant click. Like this is where it's at, man. And so I'm glad to keep that going for the rest of our lives if God is willing. So.
Yes, my friend, I feel the same way. And ever since then, I've been longing to see you in person again. But here we are. We're doing our best online.
We can use our prosthesis for now, right? That's what I tell everybody. This technology is all just prosthesis for things that we would be able to do naturally otherwise.
It's true. And, the more and more I get on these internets and I'm doing these streams, the more and more comfortable I get. So, I feel like I fought this sort of thing for a long time in my life, especially like even in my younger years. I was really resistant to, the cell phones, the smartphones, having a laptop. I held out for as long as I could, and I don't know. I look at it differently now. I've changed my mindset, which we're going to talk about tonight. Because mindset is everything. And once changing my mindset with so many things in my life, I'm able to see the gifts and things much better than I used to, instead of trying to resist something so much that, inevitably we're all going to have to kind of embrace it in our own ways and use it how we see fit and how it's healthy for our lifestyle. So
it's here. That's it. They use that wonderful word. What do they call some people Luddites? Late adopters is a much more polite thing, right? But I've always been kind of like an evangelist for technology stuff and have been obsessed with it. Like I told my mom for my 18th birthday, either wanted a computer or a piano, and she bought me a computer and encouraged me to get into it. And I've never really been a programmer or a person who's done much with computers other than to love whatever it'll bring me, whether it's video games or lots of easy to read books and articles, lots of internet stuff. So I get it, but sometimes I feel the other way. Like, is it time to leave all this crap alone and tell everybody, you're going to have to write me a letter, man. I'm not on there no more. I don't want to do it anymore. But I really doubt that I'd be able to pull that off, Michelle.
Yes, I feel you. And I think we all go through those moments too. At least I do. And I know Mario does, where you're just like, what is all this? Oh my goodness. Everybody's at my fingertips at all times and vice versa and what have you. And people can get a hold of me whenever they want. And there's no shutting off, but there's free will. So we can set our phone aside. We can turn it off for the night, so those are the little things that I always try and remind myself of, instead of kind of being like, it's just like, well, then turn it off.
Oh, yeah. I encourage people, like, really learn how to, if you're going to be on a platform, learn how to curate your feed and figure out at least all your settings. Like, people join Discord and then they immediately quit. And it's like, you have to go turn off everything except for like the one chat that you want to see. You have to go turn it all off, because otherwise your phone's just getting blown up all day, with notifications from 5 different apps. And it's like, no, if you're gonna download the app, you got to be ready to hit the settings button and be like, no.
Oh my God, totally. Mario is always reminding me of that because I have some of my notifications are still on, and he's like, "You got it. Just take that. Just hit the button and turn it off because because there's like a sense of urgency too when the phone is off. You think, well, it could be something serious. It might be a family member, it might be a friend, whatever. But most of the time, it is a notification. So yes, it's a good reminder.
Somebody liked my post.
Oh,
I'm so funny. I know when I've been using any particular app too much because I open my phone and I go straight to it when I was actually doing something else. And it's like, maybe less time on Twitter is going to be better because you're opening Twitter before you actually pick up your phone for something else. And you open Twitter. Like, I just opened Twitter. Like, oh God, I think I'm on Twitter too much.
Oh my God, that's so funny because sometimes I'll literally want to check the phone, like the time. I'm just like, what time is it? And then I don't even look at the time. Yeah, I didn't even look at the time. And then I went to Instagram or I got a notification or whatever. It's like, oh my God, what time is it? And then I have to go back to the phone. Anyway. Oh my God.
So to me, that's a great place to start. It's so true. And I know people relate to that feeling because like you said, we can imagine a utopia where somehow we cut ourselves out of the technological world that we live in and live in some different, it would be LARPing in my opinion anyway. If you say that's it, past this gate are no smartphones and no laptops, and what we're gonna have gas light or candles too or what, but in reality, it's just almost impossible. The world is technologically awash with all this stuff, and it's part of a healthy life to figure out how that's a balance and how you can accept it and to what degree you're willing to work with it. And it's a challenge.
Totally. Yeah, which kind of goes into what we want to talk about today. And, I kind of want to give for people who are listening who might not know who you are. Can you just give them a little rundown? Just introduce yourself in your own words. And also, too, just kind of getting into the communitarianism stuff right off the bat. Like, that's kind of where I want to start the conversation and kind of go into how you found out about this and what it made you think of and all those other things.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. So my name is Sean, and I chose the name SB Alger when I decided I was going to actually start to publish and be involved in producing content on the internet. Because when I was young, I told myself if I'm ever going to be pretentious and write books or anything, I'll use SB, like J.R.R. Tolkien, and all these guys that use their initials. So H.P. Lovecraft or whatever. So that's and it was my grandmother's nickname for me too. So it wasn't something completely random, I first jumped into actually doing stuff on the internet. I've been on the internet forever since probably the late 90s. And but I used the super chat function of YouTube to challenge a guy named Andy Worski's co-host to a flat earth debate on April 1st. God, it probably is 2016 now, that long ago. And after that, me and Jim Maiden, who helped me produce that debate, he gave me space in his basement and he helped me to kind of be my right hand man, make sure the camera and the mic and everything is all set up. Well, the next week we were like, oh, that was amazing, because there was 3,000 people in the chat, there was a lot of people watching. So we got that huge rush of live streaming. Wow, that was exciting. And Jim's like, we should keep doing it. So we decided to go completely nutso and start a show called RX Only Picture Show the next week. And we just decided we weren't going to overthink it. We were just going to start pushing the button, and just two guys. Jim juggles and sings and plays the piano. I play with the yo-yo and I sing and play the guitar. And so we decided to call it a variety show because I used to love the Smothers Brothers and other similar variety type content, even the old talk shows were kind of more variety show, old Johnny Carson style stuff. And it was really just me and Jim, and it kind of blew up when Tracy Twyman decided to join us. We had courted her for a few interviews, and she's like, hey, can I just stick around and be a team member? And of course we were flattered and flabbergasted and said yes. And so she did a lot of work with us. And after that, I stepped away for a while. I just, with Tracy's passing, there was a lot of bumps in the road and a lot of waves. And we did keep the show going for a while, but it just seemed like I really needed a break. And so Jim and a guy named David Barsky started the Weaving Spiders, which originally was more kind of a talk show kind of a thing, but it developed beautifully into this, what I call an artist's conspiracy, esoteric symposium, and like I love it. It's just so crazy that like you can get 9 or 10 or 12 people all on the screen. Usually everyone can take turns politely, and it's not really a shit show. It's not really chaotic, and I just love it. And so that's the place that usually you can find me now. Is on Saturday nights we do the Weaving Spiders Welcome stream, and the channel's Weaving Spiders Webs is the channel that you can find it if you're gonna look it up. I know that you're on there, but anyone that's listening that doesn't know. And another thing I did was in the middle of all of that, I met Beth Martins, BethMartins.com. She's my release coach, and she made an offering about the time that Trump put out the automatic money that you would have had to try to like refuse the direct deposit to not get it put into your bank account. And, as I was contemplating on that, like, am I going to take this money from the government? And I was like, you know what? I am. And I'm going to spend it on training as a release coach. And I did that. It took about 7 months. I think that was 2019. And you know how things are. It didn't develop the way I thought it would, where I would immediately get like a business model in place and then start to have clients. And, I kind of got the beginning of that started, and life threw some curveballs at me. And so right now I'm actually working as a mold maker. And I do still practice release work for myself every day. And I do help people occasionally if they hit me up in the DMs. And I still have fully an intention to develop into a more of a true like standalone coaching business in the long run. But I can't say when that's going to be dead serious, because right now I'm pretty booked. And so you know how it is. Like if you're working a 40-hour week schedule and doing whatever life requires, whether it be shopping or housework or taking care of dogs or even just taking them out for a walk, it doesn't leave you a whole bunch of time to do the other things, but I haven't given up on it by any means,
Oh yeah, no, that's great. It's how it goes. And just like we talked about backstage, it's all things in due time. And so it's
Right.
like when you try and force stuff and everything else, a lot of times things don't work out as well as they would when you just kind of allow things to flow and just, oh, this is where I am right now. And the things that I want to develop will develop when they're supposed to, and
Yeah.
everything else. It's a test in patience for sure. And
Yeah. Me and you are both people that love plants. So to me, that's an easy metaphor. Like you can't be
yes.
like, come on, tomatoes, grow taller now, hurry up. That doesn't work, so you got to allow it to develop naturally. So
It's true, and when you do that to them, they do all sorts of things to stunt their own growth or not
yeah,
grow or whatever,
you're right.
just to teach you that lesson of like, "Hey, man, we do this on our own time because we work with nature, and with nature is slow, and sometimes it's fast, and sometimes you have to kinda wait and see what's gonna go on, and it's how life
Yeah.
is." So,
And the release work, what it is it's kind of like people compare it to talk therapy, but it's really not. It's really a really simple process of asking yourself questions about whatever things might be coming up as feelings or bothering you, and just going through a process of identifying that, and then interviewing yourself, or if you're coaching someone else, interviewing them to find out how you feel about just letting it go. If there's something that's really burdening you, you just ask yourself, can you let it go? And it sounds really simple, but just that is a really powerful tool, because a lot of the time it's that simple. You say, oh, I'm really upset. I missed the bus. I'm like, well, can you just let it go and catch the next bus? Well, like if the answer is yes, then you immediately feel better. And that whole pressure, that sensation drops away, and the other big part is to notice that when you get release, whether it comes naturally and organically, which it oftentimes does, we do this all the time. It's not something that you have to learn. Everyone's releasing things all the time. There's someone owes you money. You're mad at them. One day you see them at the grocery store and you're like, I'm not mad at that person anymore. I don't feel it. I don't feel that irritation. I can forgive them. And so you've released it. It's gone away, and so it's really helped me so much, and Beth is a really excellent coach. I don't know if you've ever looked at any of her work, but she's been doing a lot of stuff in the legal realm. She just started her own private membership. What do they call it? PMA, Private Membership Association. And I found her through Picture Show. We interviewed her, and I had that like still quiet voice telling me, you have work to do with this person. It's not just a podcast relationship. It's not just a friendship. There's something here more for you. And so I pursued that, and God bless Donald Trump. He gave me the money, and I just shuttled it on over to Beth, and now I'm certified. So
No, that's awesome, man. I love that. Beth is great. I'm slowly getting to know her content and her just over online, and then
Right.
I was actually lucky enough to be able to have a conversation with her and Rachel about the Dark Feminine, which was
Oh
hosted on
yeah.
Rachel's channel. And that was really cool because it was kind of like, oh my God, Beth Martins is going to be here. Cool. So it was really sweet. And we've kind of connected over Facebook about gardening and things like that. And I think, is it called the House of Free Will? I think that's
That's
her,
right.
like,
Yes, it
her
is.
private
Mhm.
section. And she told me, because she recently interviewed Amanda Vollmer, and so she was able to get Amanda Vollmer to agree to do a little like segment or a class within the House of Free Will. So I will definitely be connecting more with Beth in the future. I can feel it, because
Yeah,
yeah, she's
awesome.
one of those great people. And I love that feeling too that you get when you meet someone, whether it's a friend or an acquaintance, and you just know that there's like more, there is something more here
Mhm.
than just that friendship or that acquaintance, and the work that can be done between people. And I feel like I've met a lot of people like that through the Weaving Spiders and through yourself. So it's a gift, that's for sure. And you got to listen to those voices, because they don't mislead you. They might lead you into something that's more difficult than you thought was going to be. But
Ain't that the truth?
ultimately, you find out that it wasn't being misled. It was actually exactly where you were supposed to be led. So
Yeah,
I love it.
exactly, It's
Yeah,
okay
yeah.
to say, "What the fuck, God?" That's not sin. It's when you blame or start to lash out. That's when you're starting to get over into the bad area. But you're allowed to go, "This is what
Yeah,
you
man. And he'll
told me
come
to
answer
come
you.
over here, something would happen, and this isn't what I was expecting."
He's like,
But
"Patience, dear child."
that's right. It's a joke in our family to never pray for patience, because that just means
Mm.
that the challenges will increase.
Ah,
But
interesting. I like that. Yes.
But I've kind of started to go against that and be like, because I mean, a big part of the release work is to just be able to welcome whatever is actually happening and not
Mm,
be worrying about what happened or worrying about what's going to happen, but whatever is actually happening, no matter how it's going, to be like, all right, can you just welcome it and accept that this is reality right now? And so to me, that I'm not so scared of praying for patience anymore, because if lots of challenges are going to come up, it's okay. It has to be anyway, so it's better to welcome it and to be at ease with it than to really wish it was different. It's
yeah,
not easy.
totally.
But
Yeah, no, I love that, because too, I always a lot of my shadow work has lied in dealing with anxiety and also like depression, more
Mhm.
anxiety though. And when realizing a lot of my anxiety was coming from, unresolved issues or traumas, but projecting how things were going to be, or what was going to happen, what would happen if I did this, all of these questions that most people end up asking themselves, which are valuable. It's valuable to kind of have like a plan in place or have an idea of where you might want to go. But when you just start projecting about what other people are thinking about you or saying or whatever, it just causes this frenzy inside of yourself that is really
Mhm.
hard to bring down if you're not in the present moment. So that's one of the things I love about this release work that you've talked about, is knowing that that's like basically what it's based in, is just like welcoming this stuff, because that is like it's just like a true key to life, I think, is welcoming whatever it is. So I'm loving
I
it.
agree. It really helps. And I've struggled with depression, and I've had bouts with anxiety here and there, but not as much. But I can totally relate to that feeling of I guess what popped into my head when you were saying it, Michelle, was there was this book. It's a really old book about the creative process. And the guy was pointing out that most people use that everyone has creativity. I know lots of people think that they don't have creativity, that I'm not creative. Well, that's not true. Everyone has a capacity and some innate ability to be creative. But what most people do is creativity is on autopilot, set to the worst case scenario, or at least to some bad scenarios. And so you get anxious or depressed, and you start to imagine how bad it already is or how much worse it's going to get, and all these negative images start to roll of oh no, I'm going to back out, I'm not going to look, I'm going to get in a car accident, I had 2 drinks, so now I'm going to go to jail, oh my gosh, like this is what the brain does naturally, right? Like goes off on this negative creative spree, and you can actually interrupt that and either just cut it off or encourage it to change to something that's more affirmative and good. And it's just a practice like anything else, and that stuff has helped me, I mean, beyond measure,
Yeah,
so
it's totally a muscle, like for sure. Take it
yeah.
can take years to develop, and it's one of those things too where just like with anything, you can introduce these kinds of concepts to people, but it's up to the person if they're going to want to try and do it,
Yeah.
whatever, because it's one of those things that you actually don't see the results until you do it with just like with most things in
Yeah.
life. Like you're not gonna you could tell someone all day that no, if you do this and this is how you do it and these are the thoughts you can have or whatever, but until they actually start practicing it, they're not gonna feel it. And yeah, so
Yeah.
it's all about action.
It is, and I would say that a lot of people, and especially us men folk, we work in an intellectual capacity out of our head, and a lot of people don't
Mm.
realize how cut off they are from the rest of their feelings that actually exist more down below the throat line, in the torso, even in the parts of the body. During release work, that's one of the things you'll do is like, okay, if a feeling's so, I'll give it to you a real short idea. So you memorize the scale of emotion, which starts with apathy at the bottom, and at the top is peace. So let's see if I can remember it. It's apathy, grief, fear, lust, anger, pride, and that's like all of the feelings on the lower end of the scale. And then higher up is courage, acceptance, and peace. And that's somewhat dumbed down or simplified. There are more expanded versions of it, but as a most simple, like an explanation of how the process works, you recognize first you recognize that you're having some kind of a feeling, like, oh, and usually it's a negative feeling because that's the main reason you would want to let it go. You can also let go of affirmative positive feelings, and it will actually, that can help too, but that's a little higher level, different thing. Most people don't think like, oh, I'll let go of courage, I'll get out of courage and move to somewhere else, but that is actually part of the work also. But so you recognize where it is that it's coming up. You try to get an idea where it is on the scale of emotion. And one of the main steps is also, okay, can I feel it somewhere specifically in the body? Is it feeling like my heart is aching? Is it feeling like I have an uncomfortable feeling in my gut? Am I feeling like I'm struggling in my throat? Maybe like and when you move out of just thinking a lot, which is what a lot of people do, and start to really develop that muscle of intuitively taking the time and space to let your body talk back to you, then to me, that's the real key when it opens up, And, the rest of the process is really just what I said. You ask yourself usually 3 questions. It's you're identifying the wanting feeling that comes along with whatever the uncomfortable feeling is. Usually we're feeling that we're wanting something to be different. You're wanting control, you're wanting love and approval, or you're wanting to feel safe, or like you're going to survive. Those are the main, most basic ways to look at it. And then you just ask yourself, say, okay, one of those intuitively feels a little bit stronger than the other. And so you say, okay, I'm feeling like I'm wanting more control over this situation. And so you ask yourself, can you let that wanting feeling go? Can you let go of wanting more control? And the trickiest part, Michelle, is the people, because so many questions are actually kind of subtle, sometimes passive aggressive commands, that I'd say if someone's going to practice this, if you're going to do what Michelle said earlier and say, what, I'm going to try this, not just going to understand it, I'm going to try it. Remember that when you're interviewing yourself, asking these questions, it's a genuine question. Can you let it go? And your overwhelming reaction might be, no, I cannot let that go. I want control. Don't ask me to let it go. So that's okay. And you just accept that part of it too. And there's a process to carry on after that. And so I'd say that's the key. That's the secret key, is that a lot of people misunderstand the process to be giving yourself a subtle hint that you're supposed to let it go, but that's not actually true. Because like if I ask you right now, are you carrying your car keys? You know the answer right now without any doubt. There's no middle ground. Either you've got them with you or you don't. And it's the same process. And so when you ask yourself or someone else in the process, can you let it go? Whatever the answer is good. And really, there's a tiny bit of release that comes even with saying no, because then you accept and welcome the fact that right now, no, you can't let it go. You're going to keep it. Whatever that feeling is, you're going to allow it to be here, and it goes back to the welcoming process again. It really works. It's interesting.
Oh man, I love this. And I feel like I mean, I'm just thinking about like situations even in my own life that I can see how this has like happened naturally even. And when I've been able to be honest with myself, because how many times have we caught ourselves in our lives where you can't be honest, you're
Yep.
actually like in denial, or you're afraid,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, and that's okay. I think that's beautiful that you made it a point to bring that up, of like, it's okay to say you're not ready to let it go. And I
Right.
think that's the healthier process of it. And I like how there's an attachment to the body, because I really love German new medicine, and I've said this so many times that I try to not like put myself all my eggs in one basket with a lot of this stuff, especially when it comes to our health and how our bodies work and everything else. But with the German new medicine, it's very similar to this release work. I
Uh-huh.
mean, it's like it when you said those things, I'm like, my brain is just like bridging these two together in a really strong way. And so, what have you noticed when you've done this work on yourself? Do you have like a certain situation that you really felt it in a specific area of the body? And then what happened afterwards? Like, because with like German new medicine, the whole thing would be, if you once you've resolved that conflict, then that's when your symptoms would arise. So have you ever noticed anything like that that's similar? Like, once you released something, was it like, okay, my arm started hurting, or I got a head cold, or anything like that?
I mean, usually it's not quite that extreme, but people do report that type of stuff. Now, the main work I did was with a partner that was part of the coursework that we took, and me and my partner actually continued on for a long time, having weekly private calls. So we got a lot of time in that way together, and so things would happen like a really common thing, Michelle, would be say, the very bottom of the scale is apathy. So if you find yourself at apathy and you're able to release the apathy, you'll move up into grief, because grief is the next step up on the scale, and you'll get tears or emotions flowing in, or say you can, and it doesn't have to be linear where you're going one step at a time. You could jump from apathy to anger and have all of the feelings of anger suddenly there, where you were so flat and depressed and you just didn't care. Nothing matters. It's not going to work. The release happens, you recognize it, and you say, now I'm mad. I can feel that I'm mad, and so sometimes that'll also accompany things like belching or itching in the body, there's lots of times when I've been on a call with my partner, and we'll get some kind of a really significant release will happen, and I'll say, hey, I got to run to the bathroom. I'll be back, because the body and it's an illusion that we're all separated into different parts. The head is part of the body. The body is part of the spirit soul complex, whatever, it's all really one thing. And it is useful, I think, to separate them out for communication and for definitions, but to keep that awareness that you really are just one thing, really one thing, part of a bigger thing. I think that's important, And so if
Yeah.
you release something emotionally, it can really, I assume that there's people that probably have had exactly what you described. You're working on something, you get the release to move forward, something happens, and you get physical pain in the body. I would be really shocked to find that hasn't happened, because it's got to have. I haven't had that experience myself with coaching anyone, but I would be really shocked to find that it doesn't happen. I mean, Beth's told me that, people have belched and or even like almost had to throw up and stuff, like sometimes you get really deep. That's the other thing. If you're going to start looking into this, be kind to yourself and go soft and easy at first, because this is kind of like a key right to the middle of your emotional complex. And that's okay, but you don't want to bum rush into it and overwhelm yourself either. It's okay to go slow,
Yeah, totally. Because you have your whole life to do it too.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's like, because I think about it in that sense that we always will continuously have personal work to do. There's always going to be something that comes up that stops you in your tracks that you didn't think was going to do that,
Right.
or, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know I had that hang up. Well, now I know I have it. So now I have to address it. You cannot address it, but it does, just end up popping up further down the road, that
Yeah,
is
well, we'd
in my
all
experience.
love it if, it was last year that I did my shadow work. Thank God that's over. Wouldn't that be
Oh,
it doesn't
yeah.
work that way, It doesn't work that way. I
No.
mean, so over and over again with release stuff, like I work really, really hard in one area that I've recognized as something that I'd like to be better, and I get so much progress, and then it pops back up again, and you're like, seriously though? I thought we just did like 6 months with this, but once again, back to the process, like, oh, well, let's just welcome it back in. We got somewhere last time, so let's keep at it, and that works.
No, definitely. I love it. That's so
So
cool.
if people want to know about the history of the process, the man who started it all was named Lester Levinson. He was like a physicist, like a really smart scientist guy. And he had like a double heart attack, and the doctors sent him home to die. And instead of dying, he decided that he was going to use his intellectual prowess to figure something out, to like, I'm not going to sit here and die like they told me to. I'm going to do something. And so he discovered the process kind of organically and naturally himself. And then over time, working with other people that he was helping, they developed it into a system, and there's a book called The Sedona Method, which is derivative of Lester Levinson's process. And there's a man named Hale Dwoskin who is the main guy that kind of helped him get the book really in order and published, and is the person who's still promoting that system now. Hale's still around doing it. And there's other people that came from this school also. Like, you might have heard of David R. Hawkins. There's a book called Letting Go, and it's almost identical work. And the rumor is that Hawkins and Levinson were actually friends and working together. And at some point they had some kind of a disagreement or a falling out. And so Hawkins went his own way and like kind of duplicated the work. But to me, it's just a blessing, because now there's twice as much availability of the process. And, and people are human beings. If you look at people that are critical of this system, they say stuff like that, like, oh, these guys weren't enlightened because they were fighting about real estate deals and all. It's like, they're just human beings. I mean, if you practice this stuff, it works. That's the only thing that matters to me, just like people will criticize Carlos Castaneda because there's a lot of ugly, weird stuff under the carpet if you peek about Castaneda, but the dream practice still works. And it's not just from him. There's lots of other places you can find the same information. So, take any individual with a grain of salt. If the thing works for you and it's functionally good and helping you, who cares where it came from,
Yeah, totally. Because then you get into the area of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which I think
Right.
just causes a lot of issues, because then you miss out on so many really great nuggets. Whether somebody is afraid someone is a shill or, whatever, that's always the word that gets thrown around, where it's like, well, yeah, there are probably people that are, planted, or they're groomed, or, whatever. I don't deny that, but everything it's like truth hidden in plain sight. So what a lot of these people bring to the table is really valuable information, but it's learning to read between the lines. And I think that that's one of the things that, when I started familiarizing myself with communitarianism, was one of the things that I was reminded of, because it's a sneaky little thing. It's very sneaky. And so you were the first person to kind of bring this into my field. And then our friend Rhonda, actually, you introduced it to her as well. And so then at the meetings that we all were going to for a while there, she brought it up one night, and it was just like, it all kind of like really made sense to me and Mario, and then a lot of people at the group, because it's sneaky and it comes on as a friend, because who doesn't like community? And that's one of the things too. Like, once we get into this subject too, I just almost want to just preface it by saying, I think having community and having people is wonderful. And I believe that we as human beings thrive when we have other people to help support us, and then we can support them, and vice versa. But there's natural community that forms just like organically, and where people have autonomy in the community and they're able to work together, and things are like, set up in a way where it does benefit everybody. But then you have this thing that's more the communitarianism, which seems to, there's an underlying element of control. And Mario did mention this, and I have to say it and give him credit for it, but he said, communitarianism to me seems like it's actually anti-community, because it actually isn't really there to lift the community up. It's actually kind of in my opinion, seems like a thing that's brought onto us to kind of like put us into like squander and like put us against each other and start
Mm-hmm.
policing each other and blaming people and not
Yep.
blaming yourself. So I find that it's like one of those things where people are really easy or quick to police others, but they actually won't police themselves when we're in more of a
Yeah.
system like this. And
And I would
that
agree
is
totally. Yeah.
dangerous. It's
Yeah.
really
And I
dangerous.
think, I mean, it's unfortunate that they're able to be so uncanny and conniving about their methodologies because, if you ask someone, do you want to have clean air and water? The answer is obvious. Of course, all of us want the most basic, obvious, healthy, good things in life. Of course, we all are gonna, our default response is going to be yes. And they know that. So then they build up a system around that where they're using that. It's like a Trojan horse or a shield. This is their little sneaky way to get in. And so then if you say, oh, I have doubts about that, I don't know about this way that we're claiming that we're going to get clean water, then it's easy for them to shake their finger at you and say, oh, look, you're on the other side then. And really that's the reason I found it, Michelle, was probably 2006, 2007, somewhere around that time. I kept seeing this phrase, Hegelian dialectic, over and over again. It kept popping up. And I looked at the basic definition. I'm like, okay, it's like problem, reaction, solution. The way I always explain it to people was, well, first of all, people should know that Hegel, the philosopher, he thought, no, I disagree with Hegel, but Hegel, the philosopher, the reason they call it Hegelian is because of Friedrich Hegel. And he believed what he had discovered was a natural occurring process, that there's something and then there's the opposite of that something, and that they naturally kind of tussle with each other until not one wins, but until like a new thing arises because of the disagreement of those things. So it's, they call it thesis, antithesis. And so you have a thesis and an antithesis, and those things go at each other, and that resolves into something new and different, and then that becomes a new antithesis, and that's the process of dialectic, of things kind of clashing and then transmuting into something new, and then a new antithesis arising. Well, Hegel thought that was a naturally occurring thing that he had discovered. But what you find is people that use this process like a tool, of course, they've taken it out of the naturally occurring area and they've moved it into something that they have in their tool bag. So now I usually tell people it's like the mob comes around and they're like, hey, we're offering homeowners insurance under the table over here. You guys want some? And you're like, no, we're good. We don't want any. We don't want to buy insurance from the mob. Thanks anyway. And then, 2 days later, your neighbor's house burns down and they come back and they say price is doubled, but it's still available. And you're thinking, maybe I do need homeowners insurance if they're going to start burning down houses in this neighborhood. That's the process that they have us against. And it's with everything nowadays. Back then, I found Nikki's work because I Googled Nikki Rapana is the woman's name. She just passed away last year and it broke my heart. But she had a webpage called the ACL, which stood for Anti-Communitarian League. And she had the most popular page on the internet for answering the question, what is the Hegelian dialectic? And so when I found it, I was like, oh, cool. This is really like explaining it in depth. And then I just completely got lost in her material because she had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resources of her own writing, of links, of explanations, of things that she'd found. And she was very tight about what she would use as a citation. She wouldn't use anyone's work, even though she might read it and appreciate it. She wouldn't reference anyone that wasn't like the most ironclad resource. Like it have to be pretty much tracing back, like right to the government websites, right to the United Nations website, right to source material that wasn't like, some zealous Christian or whatever, And so that made her work impeccable. And her and her daughter, Nordica, they wrote a book called 2020, Our Common Destiny. And it was first published, I think, in either 2009 or 2011. And I'll get you all this information after the show so you can put it in the notes or you can send it out in your newsletter or anything like that you might want to do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Because Nordica, her daughter, Nikki wasn't sick or anything. She just the weather, the smoke was really bad, and she had already had respiratory issues. And up in Alaska is where they lived, and she just unexpectedly had respiratory distress, and they weren't able to save her. So it was just a completely unexpected tragedy. And so her daughter is now trying to carry on. She has 4 sons. And so she has a GoFundMe and stuff. And I always try to encourage people, like, if this communitarianism work, the anti-communitarian league work touches your heart and really does something for you, to send money to Nordica's GoFundMe is important, because she's not flush with cash. She's making it, but she's under a lot of grief and a lot of duress. But we've talked, and she does intend to carry this work on to some degree. There was a book that Nikki was going to write, like, as kind of like the third part of the trilogy. And I intend to help her do that. And it's really kind of the esoteric occult side of the whole thing, And
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. If
I was just going to say, I mean, just in case people listening have never heard of it. So communitarianism, the word is kind of steeped in mystery. It's kind of hard to say. It's really hard to spell. Nikki said that she thought it was a spell, and this, when I found her, it was before me really looking at all words and all language as being some part of spelling, like spelling and egregores and all this grammar and all the kind of stuff that we know about now that we're all more well versed in it. But the main guy that is given credit for the communitarian network, they call it, is a man named Amitai Etzioni, and he's George Washington University, like, he headed up his whole communitarian network out of there. And the most core definition, if you look it up, is that communitarians believe that we focused for too long on individual rights, and that now we need to acknowledge that and balance individual rights versus the rights of the community. And like you said, so to me, a community is something that you choose to be a part of. Like the spiders is a great example. If someone says, "Are you one of the weaving spiders?" and you naturally say, "Yeah, I go on there sometimes. I'm one of the spiders," then that's a genuine community. And I feel this way about everything they say on the media about community. They said the Black community, the gay community, the white nationalist community, etc. They put this label out there of community, and I would most of the time disagree. I know people in all of those categories, and none of them agree with each other in such a way that you can call them a community. They may all be parts of specific different communities that don't necessarily fall under those labels, or maybe they even do, but it's not perfect, But they use this word as a way to opt you in kind of a passive aggressive way. We need to look out for the better needs of the global community. Like, well, what's that? And it can't actually be defined. That's the real trick. If people take any one thing away, that's what I would, the idea that they kind of use this Svengali magic process of say, oh, well, we need to balance the rights of the individual, which is something we can all actually relate to, because we are literally individuals, and we know what we prefer for our own autonomy, for our own sovereignty, our own freedom. We know, at what level we prefer that to exist,
Yeah.
For me, it's pretty high. Like, I'd rather be absolutely free and at risk every day of death and starvation and violence, as opposed to have anything that's claiming it's protecting and helping me and alleging that it's giving me protection. I'll take real freedom, scary ass, real deal freedom. Not everybody will. So everybody as an individual knows where they land on that scale, but they don't, they kind of sneak past, it's dishonest at its core, this ideology, in my opinion, and there are a lot of critics of it, but they don't really get published and publicized, like, just like everything else, like there's lots of people that would love to tell you why they think this is bad, but you're not going to see them talking on CNN or Fox News. And if you are, they're kind of the softball version, kind of the managed, curated, shilly version of why it's bad, and not really diving in deep to the nature of the whole thing,
Yes. And I love that point about the putting community on all these labels, all these people, the gay community, the whatever community, this community.
Right.
That's a really great point. I haven't thought about that, but that's true, because it's just another way to kind of force feed this idea to us that we all are supposed to support what all these communities do. And we have no real say in it, though, because if you disagree, that's the thing about the communitarianism. Once you disagree, then you are shunned from the community. You're irrelevant. You're not good enough for that. But that's where it gets really tricky too, because one of the things I thought about was how brilliant the scamdemic shows just what communitarianism is, because it became, you have to get vaccinated. If you're not vaccinated, you can't have this job. If you don't wear a mask, you can't come into our place. If you see someone that isn't wearing one, you should tell them how you feel. You should report them.
Right.
All of these things. And it was all for the greater good that you took their cowpoke, right? That was the
Right.
reason why we were all supposed to do it, was to protect everyone else around us. But there was no real emphasis on protecting even yourself, or questioning why we're all supposed to do this for everyone else's health, when we're dealing with people who actually aren't even really interested in real health. And that's the other thing about it too, because I think it's a really great example with like the education system, allopathic medicine. These people really don't have our best interest in mind, yet they will sell you all day that they do. They'll do
Right.
anything they can to convince you that they care about you, but in reality, they really don't. And I think that that's one of the more deceptive, passive aggressive, dishonest
Right.
things
It's
about
all
it.
marketing and politics.
Totally, man.
Yeah.
And it actually, I mean, it kind of sickens me, but it makes me happy to be able to know that this is going on. And that's one of the main reasons why I wanted us to get into this, because I think that there's a lot of people out there that have never even really heard of the term communitarianism and have no idea that it's even out there.
Yeah, well, so I mean, so what happened with Nikki and Nordica was their landlord, they were living in low-income housing in Seattle, Washington, and their landlord knew that Nikki was trained as a journalist and as a researcher in college, and her landlord knew that. And so his name was Hugh Sisley, was the man's name. I think he's finally passed away now. And he was kind of a scummy slumlord type of a guy, but Nikki was still willing to work with him and help him, just because she was kind of an old-fashioned American that way. You know, it wasn't her favorite guy, but they came and they were claiming that they were going to use eminent domain to take away his properties to install a light rail, which is all, I mean, honestly, this is like become a canard, a cliche. I mean, you know, from the Portland area, if they start talking about where the train is going to expand or need to be built into next, everyone pulls their hair out. You know, it ties into gentrification, and you know that the lowest income populations are immediately going to be affected the hardest, because that's just the way it goes, you know. And so she started diving into trying to do the footwork to help him understand what case was coming up against him as far as the city of Seattle eminent domain versus his personal rights as a property owner. And she just stumbled full board into this ideology of communitarianism. It was in all of their papers and all of their books, you know, like they were referencing Amitai Etzion's books and other, you know, source material. And the more she looked, she's like, what the hell is this? You know, like, what is this weird word? And for years, I mean, she used to be mad because people would tell her that she was a conspiracy theorist, that she was crazy, that she made it up. And I mean, like I said, she cites everything beautifully and perfectly. And the other thing was, they knew that 2020 was their date, because that was also in all of the literature and books and paperwork. They were constantly using that. They call it visioning. You know, they're visioning for 2020. We're going to be there by 2020. And that's why you hear also of Agenda 2030, because they see that a lot of the marks that they wanted to hit by 2020 didn't land, you know, yet. I'd say they made reasonably good progress, unfortunately, but that, you know, they still have more plans for us. And so it's 2030 is the new date. But man, I was on a roll there and I lost my train of thought. It's okay.
It's okay. It'll probably come back. And because one of the things that if it comes back, just jump in. Because one of the things that, when I was reading one of Nikki's articles, she has a quote or it's not direct quote, I guess, but she talks about how this concept reemerged in Israel in the 1940s. And that was like when this kind of thing kind of even came back on the radar. And then this is a quote. In less than 50 years, global communitarianism replaced every other justice theory in the world. That is fast. And so to me, I mean, just knowing the roots too of the man whose name you said earlier.
Amitai Etzioni, yeah.
Yes. So, you know, I don't know. I'm on
He's
YouTube.
Yeah, I know exactly. I was thinking the same thing. Like, you know, Michelle's gonna get her channel attacked.
I know. I'm like, oh God, watch your mouth, mom, lady. But Anyway,
No, I
yeah,
mean,
go
but
ahead.
to me, that's to the point. That process, I would just describe what you just went through, and me here with you, us together, self-policing, live on a broadcast, taking consideration of what we may or may not want to say openly, is that's the end results of communitarian ideology. And they openly say it. I'm not making accusations against their ideology. They say we intend to use shame and self-policing. That's why they use the word governance instead of government, because governance is us governing each other and not anyone governing from the top down like we're used to. So that's why they call it global governance, because they have this idea of changing it, and it's starting to happen. We're seeing it now. It's really not, it's not hidden. I remember private messaging Nikki and just being like, oh my gosh, like, can it get any worse how right you were? Like, you were so right that it makes me want to cry, literally. And I mean, because they polarize, we would sit and imagine how are they gonna polarize us, and so you brainstorm and you spitball. But I mean, all the ways that they've brought forward to get people to choose sides, go to their side to the maximum, stay in their side's echo chamber, hate the other side like they're literally the devil themselves, dehumanize the other side, whether it's Republican, Democrat, flat earth, globe earth, abortion, productive, rights, and it doesn't end. There is so many places that you can say, oh, look, they've given us a way to polarize ourselves if we choose. If you don't choose, then you get the shame treatment. Like it's right there. It's a strategy to shame people, and they've really brought it out with 2020 in a way that I was dumbfounded. Like, wow. I mean, that was the name of the book. To me, people say, oh, is she a prophet? Like, no, she just did her homework, and she read and read and read and wrote and wrote and wrote. And she was sick of it, honestly. She hated it. She hated that people didn't wake up. She hated that people didn't turn on to it and actually support her. She lived in poverty. They used to make their own houses up there in interior Alaska. They would build yurts out of found items and donations. And just because she just bailed. She's like, I'm out of here, man. I'm not going to live in this society if this is the way we're going. Because she was raised in an old-fashioned American. Her dad was like a reasonably high-ranking military guy. And, it's American bootstrap ingenuity. You do what you're supposed to do. You do right. You be moral, ethical, upright, and kind. But you also, freedom is the main thing, right? And she saw that it's going away, And I'm really more in a position just to encourage people to understand what it is. It's a natural inclination for people that are freedom-loving and individualists to want to fight it. But I would encourage people that that's part of it. They want you to resist and push back against things because they can use that resistance and momentum as a strategy to move the whole thing forward. So really, I would say to keep more of a Zen attitude, back to the idea of welcoming things how they really are, releasing on things that are bothering you, and just being super well informed so that when something in your town changes or your kid's elementary school, you're aware of it. And what you said is really important, Michelle. Okay, the reason that the word communitarianism is such a big deal and why we shouldn't call it technocracy or the New World Order or any other word that they throw out there, Agenda 21. There's a lot of people that make that argument. That's like, well, you don't have to use that silly, weird, fancy word. You can just call it these other kind of more softball things that's easier for people to understand. And I mean, it's not useless to use those words and terms, and people can understand a lot by studying those things. But communitarian law is a real thing. Okay, New World Order law is not a thing. You won't go to the French courts and dig through the paperwork and find where it says this is the communitarian law that we're using, the law that's represented by the community. You won't find that, but you will find worldwide, and it's hidden the most in the West in the United States, but it's starting to come out now. Like I found it in the high school student handbook for Walla Walla High School, because I used to just go search the word in quote marks and add words like PDF or education or whatever and just see what pops up, and so you'll find the word communitarian sneaking in all kinds of places, and it's because it does tie back to an actual legal architecture foundation that they're building. And that's why it matters, because the actual laws are what govern the country, even if they're crooked, You know, whatever laws we have and we're under right now, those are actually protecting us and or hurting us, depending on if they're good or bad laws. But that's it. That's your last line of defense. And in the system that we grew up in, you had to be able to show damages, right? I mean, that's the idea in the Western legal system. Like, you drove your car through the front of my house and now you got to pay to fix it. And you also got to pay for my kid's therapy because it scared the shit out of them, right? And that's how you come to court. Not, you drove your car by my house and I imagined that you might crash through there. And I told my daughter that you might, and then she still had therapy and nobody ever got wrecked, but I still want something, because that doesn't make any sense. There's no damages there. But the communitarian ideology is more on that side. They call it broken window theory, if someone wants to look that up. Broken window theory is like the idea that a broken window in the neighborhood makes everybody worried that the neighborhood's going to go downhill fast and there's going to be more crime and more violence. And it's nonsense. Of course, it's not legit. It's a shitty, stupid theory that should have been tossed out with immediacy. But they glom onto that kind of thing. They put it out in front of them like a shield, and they get all kinds of rally of support of financials and media behind it. And then we're all stuck with like trying to, like, you can't just explain that you don't believe in broken window theory because you think it's stupid and it's nonsense, because they won't accept that, you know. And then they'll move back to their shame strategy. Like, oh, yes, Michelle wants to live in a shitty neighborhood with broken windows and bad water and air. You know, that's
horrible witch.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah, you know what this makes me, what comes to mind with this for me is you know, well, because my dad lives in a suburb like this, but like the community board, you know, what is it called? I can't remember the name.
Homeowners association.
Yes, where it's like, oh, well, you have to trim your grass to 4 inches, and if you don't, we can give you a fine, or everyone has to have the same colored fence in front of their thing. Yeah. Or you can't plant plants in the median grass, but you can plant them in this area. You can't have chickens, but you can have this. And people pay. They pay to be a part of something like this. And I think that that's one of the reasons why this kind of stuff works. And I love that broken window theory thing, because I can even remember my mom thinking that, like, oh, there's like a junky car parked over there or whatever. Well, what does that mean? Why is that junky car there? It's like, I don't know. Maybe somebody's relative just doesn't have a nice car. God forbid. Yeah. And they came to visit. It doesn't mean that now robbers.
Yeah, they had a crappy car already, and then it broke down and they had to leave it there. You know, they don't have the resources to have it towed away or fixed, you know.
Right.
So that means we should attack them and send them an HOA bill, right?
Totally. And then it's like they want all these things done, but they're not willing to do it themselves. So one of the major arguments that usually comes up when somebody talks about, oh, we'll just say taxes. Okay, you know, well, if I stop paying taxes, or if we don't tax this, if this isn't taxed, who's going to fix the streets? Who's going to be in charge of fixing the road? Well, you know, it's just everybody wants this. They want the utopia, but they're not willing to put the work in for it. And I think that that's like a major downfall in a lot of communities, if they're intentional communities or, you know, whatever. I've heard Ben Balderson talk about this. You know, everyone loves the idea of having a community and a community garden and all this stuff. But when the rubber hits the road and the work needs to get done, sometimes it falls on the backs of 1 or 2 people, but you have 50 people that want to be involved, you know.
Yeah,
and so
they want the button and the moniker that says, you know, garden manager, but they don't, you know, they just scratch out the manager part and write in garden lover, and they're really happy that someone else has picked up the. You know, it reminds me of an old Kurt Vonnegut Jr. has always been my favorite fiction author. I really have a kindred spirit for that guy. And somewhere, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, people are willing to build and they love to destroy, but no one wants to do maintenance. And it's just true. I mean, and I'm not counting myself out, you know. I mean, I should run my vacuum cleaner across the rug a lot more often than I do, because that's maintenance of the rug, right? I mean, not only does it make it look nicer, but that's what's going to make your rug last, is if you give it some, the vacuum cleaner itself too. Now, how many times have you tried to help someone clean up their house and you try to vacuum and the vacuum is in such bad state of repair that it won't even suck? So you spend an hour and a half ripping the thing apart and trying to get the hairball and all the dirt and maybe tighten the belt, because no one's thought for 3 years to empty the vacuum, let alone maintenance it in any way, right? You know, and it's hard to tell yourself, well, we got to put a lot of maintenance on the schedule if this is going to work. All of us
Yep.
that are live streaming know, because when this episode's over, you've got a minimum of 30 minutes of work to do if you're going to honor your process and make sure that whatever we did now moves into whatever your archive is and all the things you might want to do with it. If not, then later, good luck. If you don't know where the file's saved, to have a reasonable architecture for how you saved it and where, then you end up messaging Mario.
It's true. Oh my God. Where did I put it, babe?
Hey, remember when we did that thing? Do you know where that thing is?
Oh my God. It's so true. And even, to the level of, and I just speaking from my personal method, it's like, as soon as I get off of these shows, Mario and I sit down and we have dinner and we talk about the things that we noticed in them, because it's not only knowing where the file is, it's like, what was it that maybe you didn't like as much how you did this? What can you improve? How did this go? What went well? What didn't go as well? What do you think you can do better for next time? It's like, if you're not doing that for something like this or anything in life, it's your vacuum cleaner that just doesn't work, because you never took that time to evaluate what was happening and how it went out and being honest with yourself about it. And I think that is one of the most valuable things that you can give to yourself, is actually just like really questioning the things you do, the thoughts you have, where they come from, what's the origin, how does it really make you feel? I mean, which goes all into the release work. But
yeah, if you do enough vacuum cleaner maintenance, you might find that you don't like your vacuum cleaner at all, and that you want to save the money and buy a new one. But you'll never find out if you're not taking care of it.
Exactly.
It's true about everything.
Yeah, and I feel like the communitarianism wants people to it allows people to feel like they're doing something when they're not really doing much at all. And that to me is one of the more tricky things about it. And one of the big things that comes to mind is like protesting. Okay, we can go out and we can protest, and that's something that communitarianism actually encourages. Okay, go out into the streets and protest, or go down to the city hall and testify, or whatever. And hey, I have to say, I was in that mode when I was younger. I was totally in that mode. And so
Portland, it's huge, so it's very easy in the Portland area. I mean, they literally march in the streets every weekend, literally. I mean, I'm not being facetious at all. You have to look out and squint at the sign, right? Like, what are we protesting this week?
It's true. And there's numerous organizations and places you can volunteer for that are in the same mentality. I had my time with an organization called Sisters of the Road, who works with homeless people. So it's like, it's an awesome concept, because it's like they can go there and you can get a hot meal, it's shelter, you can get coffee, there's meetings that happen or whatever. But I slowly started seeing all these kind of more communitarian, communist sort of ways that they work with stuff. And I'm like, I actually don't know if their MO is actually really helping these homeless people,
right?
But just enabling them to continue to be homeless and continue to kind of have the bad behaviors that's keeping them here. So is this really even helping? And this was years ago. This was kind of like in the beginning of my truth.
You're seeing that what you were imagining was obviously true, because now it's so bad that people can't go downtown. And I mean, I'm not being critical of homeless populations. I am not. Lots of those people don't really they've chosen that lifestyle. My aunt used to be that way. She would get sick of living in a ratty apartment with a shitty car, and she'd say, you know what, screw this. I'm taking my dog and I'm hitting the road. I don't want to be a part of your society anymore. I'm going to go back and live under the bridge with my friends, And most people don't realize that there's a whole gradient scale of what it means to be approaching any of those kind of problems. And it could involve drug addiction or trauma or mental health challenges. And it also involved, like what I said, the idea that you don't see where you fit into this system, or the system's changed enough that you don't like it anymore. You don't want to be part of it anymore. And so when something's that nuanced, it's really hard to help. So you have to go with the goggles on down on the street to see all of those categories and more that you haven't identified yet. And all of those might change from week to week, from person to person. Well, it's easy to understand why you get this kind of blanket mode where they're going to help,
Yes.
But real help is hard, man. The main thing is whether or not someone's willing and able to be helped,
Totally. That is like the biggest part of it, I think. And it just like is the person willing to change? You know,
Yeah.
that's like a one of the biggest questions that you can ask a person, and not even you can find out the answer without even asking them the question is kind of one of the
Yeah,
one of the
you can
things
just
you
make
start to
some
learn.
hints. Yeah, you can make some hints about what direction you think everything should go, and you can see their hackles come up immediately.
Yeah, just how they
You know.
respond to a question that you ask them will tell you, "Okay, yep, I see where you're at and that's cool. I respect where you're at, but," and then I get the choice to involve myself
Right.
or not.
Yeah, then my boundary changes based on the fact that you said you enjoy smoking heroin, and I don't. I guess I can't help you much, or whatever it might be. Oh, I wanted to
Exactly.
say, Michelle, you said the word communism, and it's a really common canard for people to conflate communitarianism with communism and say,
Okay.
oh, it's just a new word for communism. Why don't you just call it communism? That's what it is. We're still looking at the McCarthy era flourishing. And there is a lot of truth to what McCarthy had going on. There were a lot of communists and a lot of secret communism going on in the world that people kind of lampooned and made fun of back in the day, like, oh, all of the Hollywood people are secret communists. And it's like, well, yeah, actually, a lot of them were. That's true. Some of them were card carrying members. But I would say the difference, so people understand for sure, is that what communitarianism is the you've got the pillar of capitalism and the pillar of communism, which in my opinion are things that they gave us. These did not just organically arrive. These are systems that they gave us. And so communitarianism is taking the worst aspects of those two things and alchemically joining them into one. And I would even go as far as to say that the 9/11 ritual was symbolic of that. It's symbolic of joining the two pillars of the Kabbalistic tree. And I mean, this is a ritual of joining the pillars together into one thing. It actually ties into the trans side of things too. That there's a big secret kind of hard to understand black magic aspect to this whole thing. And what makes it not communism is the fact that it is facets of what I call monopoly capitalism and facets of what would have been kind of old school militant communism. It's like they took all those pieces and they made a new Voltron with it. It's
Ah,
not
okay.
it's not just one or the other. And they're not getting rid of either system. They're drawing these things together into one new thing.
Gotcha. Yes, because while we were talking about this, Mario and I say we were kind of just like, wow, it's very similar to what communism seems like what they stand for as well,
It
And
is.
so I'm glad you went there because I want to try and make this clear for people who have never heard about this before
Right.
because it's
It's a
super
real
valuable.
challenge. It really is.
It seems to be, and I know that even just when I started revisiting it and I was reading things and thinking about this stuff, it took me a few days to even just rewrap my head around it and be like, "Okay, so this is how it's going. This is what the deal is, whatever." And so one of the things I did for myself, and maybe we can just work through these couple lists that I wrote out just to help somebody who might be
Yeah.
like, "Okay, I'm starting to get this, but whatever." And you can help me with it.
Yeah, I can't
So
tell you how happy it makes me to hear you say this because it's just like what we were talking about earlier that if you do the work, then you get somewhere. But if you just hear it and understand it and you don't practice it, then it's not the same. And so it gives me great joy in my heart when someone says that it clicked, they get it. Because if that happens, all of the mud in the water kind of clears up. And all of a sudden you go, oh, I see it. And you're not confused and you're not taking sides anymore. It's honestly terrifying and depressing sometimes.
yeah.
But I'd rather be terrified and depressed and know the truth than to be fooled and choosing sides when that's what they want me to do. So, and I'm
Indeed,
totally
my friend.
stoked to hear your list.
Good. So what I did, as I just said, so what communitarianism discourages. So what do they discourage, in my opinion?
Mm-hmm.
Critical thinking, true personal development and empowerment, criticism of the state, unpopular opinions, questioning of authority, sovereignty and natural formed community, autonomy from the state. Now, those are the things that
Yeah.
I thought they discourage. And so, what I think they encourage is herd mentality, victim mentality, a scarcity mindset, protests, public debates, common good over personal interest, submission to the tribe rather than the development of one's own mind, policing one's neighbor, public education, allopathic medicine. The list can kind of go on from
Yeah.
there. But that's where my mind went when I wanted to just kind of, all right, let me just kind of put it into simple terms even for myself so I could maybe help someone else think
Oh,
of
that's
it.
brilliant. It's true. Everything you said is completely true. And that's why it's shocking and disappointing when the water does clear up, because you're like, hey, and what they do is there's one thing I always tell people: to look for a paralleling strategy. So you have the real truth, which honestly, if the real truth is available and not hidden, it stands on its own, and there's nothing you can do to hurt or change or affect it in any way. But there's lots of people that really don't like it, whatever the real truth. It doesn't matter which category. I don't care what category it's in. If it's the actual 100% pure hard truth, it doesn't need any help. But what they'll do is, because they don't like that truth, is they'll pull off 80% of it, and they'll develop an almost identical scenario where they either lie openly or omit carefully the things that they would prefer not be out there. And then they'll bring that along. So if you tell the communitarians what you just said on the list, they would say, oh, we agree, but, and then they would backpedal into these parallel versions of individual rights, of bodily autonomy, of why we should definitely be able to criticize and not participate in allopathic medicine, for example. And so that's what I would say. People, if you look back to the shill thing, I mean, that's what happens with real genuine shills. Like guys like Alex Jones is an easy mark or a target. They give him the New World Order and a lot of strange behavior. And so there's a whole bunch of truth packed into the things he's saying. He's been proven right over and over and over again, but they negatively associate all the real truth with this weird guy, and they omit key pieces that are going to prevent you from having a 100% understanding of what's really going on. And so it's really challenging. But I mean, to me, that's one of their main things, is to parallel. They parallel the truth with a really kind of dramatized, reasonable version of it. That's if you tell people that they're not understanding, then they feel like they are, because they're 80% of the way there. But the 20% is the key. It's like the keystone pieces. The most important pieces are missing. And usually at that point, they've turned that around or inverted it, or kind of, I always tell people it's like the tunnel in the Warner Brothers cartoons, You just run right into the wall. You think you're heading down the street, and instead, kablamo, they just run you right into the wall,
Yeah, totally. Oh my God. I just had a thought and it escaped me. But I'm glad. Thank you for listening to my lists, because I was excited to be able to do that, and just kind of, it helped me to even just understand it even more from the first time that I really started looking into this.
To me, we could fill them out. It makes me want to make a web page for everything on both lists and just start dropping links. Like, see, we told you, here's the examples, because it's true.
Yeah, no, it totally is. And I think for me, the biggest, one of the bigger ones is like the education system and the allopathic medicine, and specifically with the education system, because now what's happening is that the schools are kind of interjecting into these children's lives without the consent of the parents. So whether that be whatever, okay, now we have a transgender study program, and oh, Timmy said he feels this way, and so, but we're not going to tell mom or dad about that. We'll just do that at school, and then whatever, all these things happen like that, and it's weird that that is actually okay. I don't know. I guess I never, maybe it was happening also while I was in school and I didn't know or whatever, but it just seems like it's kind of a newer thing over the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, maybe, where this is kind of like, it's just the more sneaky things like this. And it's kind of, it's wrong. I mean, it's just, it's downright wrong in my opinion. And so anyway, that's why too, when I hear people are struggling with figuring out what to do, putting their kids in public schools or not, or whatever. And I can't speak on this because I don't have children and I don't know how challenging that is. But man, it hurts my heart to know that children are being thrown into this system like that still, and they're subjected to this kind of stuff, because it's really hard for children to decipher, and it's hard for adults to decipher a lot of the stuff, let alone a child who's confused and then being kind of led in this certain way without having the stability of a parent to kind of be like, no or yes, and then the parents are in this pigeonholed position, not wanting to reject what the school is saying for fear of rejection from the school or
Right.
repercussions,
You don't want to
whatever.
rock the boat and be the one parent who always has to stake a claim and make an argument and, all that kind of stuff. And I would say that it's just gotten more and more obvious and worse, but I would say that it's been that way for all of our lives and even longer. I can remember parents complaining to me that their children would never they would come home, they wouldn't, they'd go to the first couple of years of school and then they'd start to come home with suggestions and shaming, and smoking is a great example. There was such a campaign with the DARE programs, drugs and smoking cigarettes. And so then, you kind of passively train the students at the school to abuse their parents out of smoking cigarettes. Now that seems like that could even be a good thing. Some people I'm sure think, well, that's good. If they quit smoking, that's good. But in my opinion, if you're being dishonest in your strategy, then it's questionable at best. The outcome, I don't like ends justifies a means. I don't believe that. We can't twist everybody's arm to get them to do what we want because we know it's best. It's not true. That's not the way to do things. And if a parent needs to quit smoking, that's totally on them and not on, some third grade teacher scaring the kids with how bad cigarettes are and then coming home and, lots of tears and writing a note on the cigarette box to twist your mom's arm into helping her stop. That's not the right approach. And so if it's a bad approach, then we shouldn't use it, but I'd say it's gotten way bald in your face, big, scary stuff in the last 10, 15 years is way different. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. And it's happening just everywhere, at least from my.
Well, and it's free childcare. So how do you get out of it? People are already both parents are having to work a job just to cover bills and rent. And so what you're supposed to say, oh, well, okay, so I'm going to homeschool. Yeah, right. So that means one of us is going to quit our job and then suddenly become a teacher and if we still want our kids educated according to the system, then we have to get some kind of a reasonable plan together that matches their plan so that whoever we're dealing with on the system side is saying, yeah, we still rubber stamp your kid as quote unquote educated. It's hard,
Oh, yeah, totally. And from people I know who are or have homeschooled their children, I mean, every one of them will tell you how challenging it is and how much they've had to you just have to really be strong about it too. And you have to stand in your conviction and your integrity of knowing that, no, I'm going to do this. And I feel like that is what 2020 brought out. That's what a lot of these situations that are surrounding the thing of communitarianism, I think, is what it's the heart of it or something. It's I don't know if I'm rambling right now or not making any sense, but
no, you're doing fine.
Okay. I just feel like this is kind of communitarianism is the just the heart of the issues that we're seeing right now in the world in general, not all of them, but I think from a social perspective and all the pressure that everybody's feeling with these social things and how we're supposed to carry ourselves and what we're supposed to do. I think that this is kind of the heart of it. And so
right. Because they paint everyone that's on the other side that didn't go along with cowpokes and masks. And even if you just had the most minor and reasonable protest of why you wanted more information or you weren't going to participate yet, because there's a lot of people that were in that category that weren't necessarily staunch anti. All of those people are immediately pushed into you're too focused on your individual position. You need to sacrifice some more of that position so that everyone else is better, comfortable, safe, and that's the trick. That's it. I mean, they don't even hide. I mean, that's what they say. If you look up the definition on Wikipedia or on Google, that's what it's going to say, that the idea is they'll say to balance or to harmonize the needs of the community by taking away individual liberty. We focused on individual rights for too long. Now we got to knock that back down so that the community can be empowered. And the reason it's nonsense is because there is no community. There's no such thing as a community except the one that you decide that you've opted into. And that might change. Honestly, it could change during the next meeting 2 times. It could be that you don't feel like a piece of this community while this guy's talking. And then you're like, maybe I could still be here. It's in flux all the time. It's not a rubber stamp thing like that,
Totally, because we're all in flux every single day.
Right.
You wake up and you're kind of like a different person every single day. You're still
Yeah.
you, but you're going to have different thoughts. You're going to feel different. Who knows how
Yeah.
you
The guy that wasn't going to eat sugar last night's having a donut this morning, man.
Oh my God. Yes, that's so
All you
true.
got to do is carry the donuts in the box, and now I'm a new guy right now.
Nice, dude. That's hilarious. Oh my God. This is great. I'm so stoked we've gotten to talk about this because one of the other things I wanted to ask you is, do you see something like communitarianism following suit as it has? Do you see it just becoming more of an issue as time goes on? Or do you think that more people are going to start realizing stuff like this, seeing the folly in it, and actually maybe stepping up and starting to make changes that might help them to break away from a system like communitarianism?
Well, okay, so the main thing I would say is that I think that they've had this plan in place for a long time, and it's that it's bigger than someone like Amitai Etzioni. His real name is Werner Falk. He escaped Germany. He's a German Jew who escaped Germany right at the time of the Nazis rising to power, and so that's all tied into his backstory. And who knows how true it is? We don't know what really happened in his life. A lot of the time, these big figurehead type people, they have like a really suspicious, weird backstory, like same with George Soros and a lot of these guys. And so I would say that it's much bigger than him, but he's their kind of behind the scenes figurehead. And I think what they want is for as many people to opt in and go along with it. His son is one of the most preeminent artificial intelligence programmer people in the world. So his son, I'm trying to remember his name, but his last name's Etzioni too. But, that's just an interesting coincidence that, because it's funny that we had this talk today. This morning, just out of the blue, on a whim, I started asking the AI chat prompt program, not Chat GTP, but one called Sonic, to explain communitarianism to me. Who are the main thinkers and leaders? And it did mention Etzioni, which impressed me because a lot of the time he kind of gets pigeonholed out. Like they kind of let other people be prominent, and him you have to kind of do more digging to find. And so then I asked, well, who are the main voices against it? And it gave me this whole list of people who, I'd heard of one of them, and some of them I'd never heard of at all. And so I corrected the chat the Sonic chat thing and told it, like, that's not right. The most prominent anti-communitarian voices are Nikki Rapana and Nordica Frederick, and they're the ones that wrote books and did all the articles and everything about it. And the things like, you know what, you're right. I'm sorry I left those guys out. They did do all that stuff. They published these books. They're referenced all the time in arguments and online debates about communitarianism. And I was like, well, that's really interesting that this thing would omit, my friends. And there's been a lot of pushback and a lot of damage control done for their info because they don't pull any punches and they don't use any softball parallel story stuff. If there's hard, ugly truths involved, they just put it out there. They deal with political Zionism in a very blatant, plain way, which is a really touchy subject, I mean, it ties into anti-Semitism and where the Jews fit into everything. And so if you're willing to try to articulate those problems in a reasonable way, a lot of the time, the only thing they can do is attack you or pigeonhole you, or they call it dynamic silence. Have you ever heard of that, Michelle? It's an actual strategy called dynamic silence where say a good example would be the academy or the academics or the schools. If you're in some taboo area, they'll kind of make a subtle agreement that we're supposed to just ignore you. We're not going to accept or acknowledge that they exist. And then if you do pop up on the radar, then there's also the strategy. Okay, so now we're going to undermine, attack, or, belittle or minimize effect. And that's what happened to Nikki and Nordica a lot of the time, because Nikki was a true independent individualist to the point that she took her family out of the city of Seattle and went to Alaska and started building houses out of scratch because she wasn't down anymore. She helped her landlord take the whole thing into the courts and lost. And when that happens, by default, you kind of help their position because you've brought an argument that whatever way they defeated and you lose. So now your case law is part of the precedent as to why the next people will get to lose. And so she left,
Yeah. I think, and it does make sense that because these sorts of programs or systems or isms have been instilled and put in at such a like early stage of the development of social, whatever you want to call it, the social structure of the world.
Mm-hmm. That's
It's
why so
more.
much money's tied up in K through 12. I used to make people really mad by saying that. Like, well, what would you do to budget differently in this state? I said, well, I'd eliminate the K through 12 program. That way,
Yeah.
60%, 70% of the money's freed back up, and now we can get to work. And they go, no. I was like, what? Get it now. Now you can develop a community. Now you're ready. There is no K through 12 program. No one's going to help you. Your kids are going to learn what you're willing to teach them. You can get together with your friends or with your peer group or with your church or whatever you think is good, and you develop the system that's yours, because that's the way I think it should be done. Our education system stems from Prussian education, and Prussian education was really to teach everyone to be literally good soldiers and intentionally to not be too smart or too independent minded. They don't teach you to think. We all know, we all went through the system. None of us were encouraged like, oh, wow, you've got some really interesting, innovative, unique, standalone ideas. We better make you the leader. That's not what happens. They go bonk, bonk. Don't say that again. F, try again. And that's why I say the education system has always been this way, but I think they feel comfortable now to really push and promote where they're going in a big way. Because I see it all tied into magic and the way that they're bringing magic back into the world in a way that I would say is less than useful, encouraging everyone that it's like Harry Potter or that it's like, Sabrina the Witch, and encouraging people to do all kinds of magical practices that honestly, a lot of times not healthy. If you don't have your own heart and mind right, you shouldn't be deciding that you're going to start to get into incantation and ritual,
I fully agree.
I know I mean, we know it blows up in your face, man. If you're listening to this and you're dabbling in magic, step back now and get your heart right. Do your shadow work, read some Carl Jung or whatever, get some books that are going to help you really know who you are. And then if you want to go back and decide you're going to draw a sigil or burn a piece of paper with a square on it, then maybe you'll be okay. Maybe not. It might still blow up in your face, but be careful.
It's true.
Not a joke. It's real.
It's real, man. And usually, I mean, when you do the personal work where you step back and you get your heart in line and you get your mind in line and all that stuff, you actually realize that you might not even need to do that.
That's right.
And that there's other ways to play with the magic that is here for us. And I always go back to action. I really do. And instead of using the time to think about how you're going to write out this magic spell or whatever for whatever you want, maybe start thinking about the steps you need to take in order to get closer to those things that you want to have in your life or feel as though you need or whatever. It's classic like Norse mythology kind of when you're looking at the base kind of like belief system, and when you're asking God or like the gods for something, their whole baseline thing is like, don't ask the gods for the thing you want. Ask the gods for the power to help you get the skills to get the things that you want or need. It's not about just like having it just drop down and miraculously.
Right. Well, I mean, if Loki would appear as incarnate form, they'd think twice about making a deal like a used car salesman with him.
Dude, totally.
You wouldn't barter then if Loki was standing in front of you. You'd be like, whoa. maybe I don't need anything at all, bro. Thanks.
Dude, totally. And Chance says the trick to magic is to be a good and honest person, then you don't need any magic. Amen. And I like that, man. That's very well said. And I think that is go ahead. It's just something that people don't.
Have you heard of Mark Stavish?
It sounds very familiar.
So Mark Stavish, he's the founder of the Institute for Hermetic Studies, and I've read a few of his books and listened to quite a few of his interviews. And there's something on the Institute for Hermetic Studies YouTube page where he talks about, like after this, I'll have to re-listen to this and make some notes for you or something, but he talks about how most people come to the idea of practicing magic from a position where everything else, for whatever reason, isn't working. So you come at it, most people approach it because your life hit a dead end, or you're having a consistent problem that can't seem to resolve, and you have tried lots of things and it just doesn't seem to be working. So then you come to the consideration of, oh, maybe I can take this. There's a further step that I could take. Maybe I'll do this. And he talks about how the reason that, in Kabbalah, you weren't supposed to start until you're 40 or more. It's
Yep.
because you're supposed to know yourself. You're supposed to have done some of your shadow work. You're supposed to have had your Saturn return. Is that right?
Yeah, you got your first one that comes around 27.
Right. And
Yep.
so all of that stuff is a part of it. And a lot of people, if you do try to sign up under them and become an initiate, they'll tell you have to go to counseling and do shadow work and do things first before they'll help you. And I feel like we don't see that. It's like literally TikTok witches trying to curse the president because they don't like him and all this strange stuff. And I mean, it breaks my heart to see it, because it's like, it's dangerous.
It is, and these people don't understand what they're courting themselves to. And
Yeah.
the whole concept of, I mean, I have a great friend, her name's Regina, and she's just brilliant with energies and working with your own energy and the fields of energies that other people have and all this stuff. And her big thing is just courting and realizing what you're courting yourself to. And it can be positive or it can be negative. And one of the practices she talks about is literally having the awareness enough that before you go to bed, like literally in your mind, even, and in your thought process, to cut the cords to everyone and everything in your life before you go to sleep, because the chords that are really meaningful to you, they're the solid chords, the people that you really just like have those connections with that are genuine, those chords will always come back. And the ones
Right.
that are kind of like maybe useless weight or whatever, they're dragging you down. Those are the ones that will eventually dissolve once you start doing these sort of like, the mind practices, the healthy
Uh-huh.
mind practices to help yourself release some of this stuff, just like we're talking about at the
Yeah,
beginning.
that's what
Holding
it made me
therapy.
think. But that's a really good idea because I mean, I do go through release process sometimes at night, not every single night, but it's a good idea to bring to mind, because I mean, they say attachment is suffering for a reason. The
Mm,
things that you're attached to and that you know in your heart that you can't let go of, and that if you lost or had that thing change, that it's really going to hurt you. It's okay to go through the process of letting that go. Your pet, we've got an old dog, and I've been doing release work when I see him. He's not sick and dying or anything. He's in great shape, but he's 17 years old, and I know he's not going to be here forever. So I'm starting the process now to let him go. And he sleeps all day. He's here. He's sleeping here now. He sleeps all day long, where we joke that he's on the other side of the veil, and then he realizes, like, someone hollers to him and across the ether that it's 5 minutes to dinner time, and he gets up and comes, like, hey, I'm supposed to get food on this side, and then I'm going back to the other side of the veil, But it's okay to let go of all of those things that you feel like that they've got a handle on you. They can steer you. They affect you. It's okay to let them go. It doesn't mean, like you said, it'll always be there. If it's supposed to be there, it'll be there no matter what. There's nothing you can do to really make it go away. But bringing it into your awareness and your consciousness and saying, I am willing to release this, it works.
it
And
does.
then when something unexpected happens, instead of getting a huge, overwhelming reaction that might push you into behaviors that you really will regret later, instead, you can feel the hurt and the pang or the shock and act in an even way, even though you're not happy. Maybe your heart's broken or you are still angry, but you're not being prompted to action by it because you weren't corded to it so tight that it forced you. You believed you had to. You didn't have a choice. So that's really not true. We have a choice all the time.
Yeah,
It's
very
just,
true.
some things are very hard to let go of.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of practice even to just realize that we're in control, and the way you react to a situation is everything. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the actual situation itself, it's how did you react to it? How are you dealing with it? That says way more about where you're at on a personal level and the persons that you're dealing with or whatever, and that's just something I try and keep in mind, because it really does make a big difference because it's easy if somebody, screws you over or whatever. Of course, a lot of times the first thing is, oh, that guy or whatever, that
Yeah.
woman, oh, them. It's like, well, yes, it's not to say that they didn't actually do something that wasn't very savory to you, but it's all in how are you going to move forward with it? How are you going to deal with it is
Right.
what is going to make or break the situation, really, in my opinion. So, yeah. And one of the
No, it's
things,
totally true. The difference between assigning responsibility versus assigning blame, because blame gives you all this area to be butthurt and grumpy and sad and angry and not be responsible. But when you get farther and farther into these spiritual practices, almost all of them come down to this idea that every single thing that happens is something that you're bringing to yourself or that's coming to you because you're supposed to have it. So it doesn't matter if it's a parent dying or what, it doesn't matter getting cheated on, losing your job, whatever, being badly injured physically and not recovering, being in a wheelchair or losing an arm. All of those things can actually be dealt with in such a way as to see it as part of the blessing and an opportunity. But if you don't do the work when things are good to prepare for that kind of stuff, when it happens, it's almost impossible to do it. And then you become jaded or grumpy or angry or limited. A lot of people are living the epilogue of their life because something happened 20 years ago and they were in no position to recover. And they still believe that was the thing. That's what stopped them. It killed them in their tracks. And now they're just waiting to die, and they're drinking or they're smoking or whatever, maybe they're just watching TV, but they didn't have the tools they needed to say, oh shit, that sucked, but I can deal with it. And if you don't believe that you can deal with it, then you're right.
Totally. And you basically are like building your own coffin. I mean, in my opinion too. So it's an interesting thing, and it takes work, and it just takes like wanting to better yourself. And I think that as I go further and further in life, I just kind of realize like how many people actually don't want to better themselves. And that's been a really good lesson for me in release, of realizing that you're not going to be able to wake everyone up. You're not going to be able to get everyone to understand these concepts. You're not going to be able to get everyone to want to try herbs instead of taking a freaking pharmaceutical pill. So just do it yourself and share it with the people that want to, and just do the best you can in that sense. Because one of the things you said earlier about like people will come to a certain conclusion, or they'll come to something at the last resort, right? The last resort. I've tried all these things,
right.
And then you come to this one place. And I always think of herbalism like that, because a lot of times when you talk to practitioners who are like clinical herbalists, or they actually have like a practice, or they just sell remedies, kind of like myself, a lot of times the people that you talk to, they have gone to all the specialists. They've gone here and they've done this and they've done that. And then they come to the herbs usually.
Yeah, to Mother Nature.
Exactly.
Right. And lots of the books I've read are that way, Michelle. The one about the man who there's a book called the clay solution, or the clay healing book, or something like that. And the guy had some kind of a growth on his hand, and it kept getting bigger and bigger. And so they went and did surgery 2 or 3 times, and they told him, hey, the cells are in there and that thing's always going to grow back. And the more we do surgery, the bigger it's going to get. And so we don't know what to tell you. You're stuck with it. And so he went studying and found just taking bentonite clay made the thing resolve in a short amount of time. And it's gone because clay will adsorb whatever is in there and take it out of the body, And that's just one example of literally infinite number of ways that people run themselves off a cliff with all kinds of strategies that they think are the right thing, out of what I call Rockefeller medicine. And if you get a dead end and get a death diagnosis, like Lester Levinson, he went home and figured out how to not die just by applying. He knew he had a powerful intellect, and that was enough, and that's why I love Beth's work, because she did the same thing. She'd learned that work, and she, to quote her, she was so far off into Eastern mysticism and doing breath work and yoga and traveling to India that she had actually detached herself from her body. And so she got a horrible cancer in her body. And then she remembered that she could work through the process of release, and what she thought was death was just a feeling, and she let it go and got well,
That's so great. I love that. And I know that this
But a lot of the time in herb or some kind of something from the earth a lot of the time is there to help too. There's people that they had to start taking blank. They start, maybe it's just turmeric, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's ibogaine, who knows? But there's options that nature has out here for us that honestly, the medical mafia is using the same thing. They're just micro synthesizing it down to the finest, most refined powder and selling it back to you in a way that it presents with side effects instead of just the remedy and the cure, because that's what pharmakia is, man.
Yeah, definitely.
They're working from the same resources. They're just making the medicine too strong.
Yeah, all the origins are in Mother Nature and in the plants, and that is just what always it brings joy to my heart, actually, knowing that, as much as it can be frustrating, knowing that we have systems in place that are disrespecting plants in the way that they are and taking advantage of people. It seriously just it warms my heart to know, though, that these systems that are in place that most people turn to, it's all Mother Nature. It's all what God put here for us to use and help us along on this journey, because it's a tough place here. This is a tough place, and all the things that we've talked about tonight, it's all working with how, this stuff is all really, it's tough stuff. It's the tough stuff in life. It's the shadow work. It's the reading between the lines. It's deciphering what's going on. It's trying to figure out your own self in the process as well. So there's just always something that needs to be done. And that's why I just think that the more we can be sovereign and autonomous in this system and find what our true heart is wanting us to do, the better off we're going to be. And so I think and that's I think it's the solution to kind of combating some of this stuff too, because as you said, these systems have been put in place forever. So it's it's not about is communitarianism going to fall or fail? Well, probably not. But are you going to fall or fail?
I think how much are you willing to opt in? And when you become aware that you are opted in, what are you going to do to allow yourself to opt back out without pushing too hard? Because pushing against the system really helps them. So it's really hard. I've been telling people for 20 years that the way we win World War III is to not fight. And the fight isn't this way. It's here in your heart. You look at this guy, he's doing something you don't like, maybe he's a trans person reading, books to kids at the library, and he's being inappropriate with his posture and his demeanor. If you immediately hate and want to attack that person, you've already lost, because now that's what they did. They put that bait out in front of you.
Exactly.
And it's up to all those parents and the people involved directly in the situation to deal with it if they're in the close proximity of it. And they also will be better served if they say, hey, you know what? I'd like to know if that's going to happen again, and we're not going to be there. And that's really the end of it. And you can tell people, hey, they're doing weird stuff at the library. I didn't like it. I stopped participating. But if you get your hackles up and you're ready to fight, they've got us. Now we're polarized. Now we're in the game. And it's hard. Don't think that I'm sitting here saying this, not looking at the media every day and going, you motherfuckers. I am. Every day,
Yeah, it's hard not to.
Feeling really lonely out here, knowing some of the information that flies around in these groups that we're in, and then going back into what we call Normieville. And you go, oh man, but it's okay. All those people are okay.
Yeah,
they're on their own path. And if they're in a different place than you, it's okay. And if it's really not okay, then you can just tell them, I got to bail, bro. I got to get away.
Exactly.
Please respect my my ability to opt out for at least a little while or whatever.
Yep. And that's the beauty of true community. And I feel like that is one of the kind of key things I wanted to just make sure people understood, is that we're not here bashing community and telling don't rally with your friends and create something or whatever. It's not about that. It's about, finding yourself involved in a community that you trust, who trust you, who resonates with you on the deepest levels. And I think that is the main thing that I wanted to drive home with it too, is to not be afraid of it. And I think most of the people that are listening and who will listen to this probably already know that that's where I stand with it. But I kind of wanted to just make sure that came off, that it's not because I wonder too, if they call it communitarianism, it's for a reason, because community, we all want community. Who doesn't want friends and family around and all this stuff?
That's if we step back and in a neutral way look at their strategy, we have to give them lots and lots of kudos and credit. You guys got straight A's in presenting and bringing this thing to this point. because if you talk about it in a kind of subtle surface level way, it seems like you got your head up your ass. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't believe in global warming? What do you mean, you don't want to get away from using oil? All these, one facet after another of all these things. They've lined them all up so that you kind of look like a dumbass if you disagree with them. But if the person you're talking to is willing to become more nuanced and have a real conversation, it is possible to explain it to them in such a way so that they can start to see that they're being opted in and they're not, the truth is no is the most powerful thing that any of us can say at any given time. And if someone tries to go around your no, then they're being completely evil. No matter how subtle or how baby steps it is, if someone tries to take away your ability to say no, then they're not right. And there's no argument against that, in my opinion. There's no point at which we're supposed to say, well, we got to trick Michelle this time. We won't do it next time. That's not right. If someone's saying that to me, I'm going to go tell her you said that. That's what's happening
right on,
next.
Brother.
That's what's happening next. That's the way it's supposed to be. And the truth is, Michelle, that to put it way like the 10,000-foot view, what I think this is they've known for a long time, whoever the secret, real powerful people are that we don't get to know their names or how big their fortunes are or what they're really involved in. They know that we're at the cusp. We're changing. We're changing from Pisces to Aquarius. And we don't know where we are perfectly on that map, on that timeline, but it's happening. And so they have to untether themselves and their entire system from whatever worked in the last age. And they have to get as many of us as possible to not realize we've been opted into whatever their new age is, what they mean when they say new age. And all the ones that are deceived or willingly opted in, or they realize they're kind of half opted in and they're not willing to pull out and get away from it, then they can be carried over into a new system that involves magic in a way that we don't really think is right, that involves currency in a brand new way. So it's all digital with NFTs and all this crypto, crypt. They've got the word death hidden right in there for you, and they're selling it to you to the hilt that it's the best thing ever. Smart contracts, like everything can be perfectly tracked. So it's completely above board and honest. Yeah, but that can also be completely inverted so that everything can be tracked so that you can't act or function in the new age without their tacit permission. And so that's the bigger picture, I think. They had to take the systems they put in place, collapse them into one, and now they're trying to jump their power across the gap. They want to keep all this power they have. They don't want it to break up so that people just do what would come naturally to be in the earth, right? Like, just give me 5 acres and fresh water and leave me the fuck alone.
Yes.
And, and let me choose who my neighbors are or whatever, or my friends are, or who comes to visit or who stays out, and let's try to keep it reasonable where we don't have to use any guns or bombs or artillery. We can talk this out, but they're not willing at this point in our lives. That's not really allowed. If you try to do that, they paint you as being crazy and weird, but really that's a very reasonable position. And so my hope is that as we slide over farther into whatever this next aeon or epoch is that huge groups of people like us and the spiders and all the other ones that are similar groups that are, a lot of them are affiliated to the spiders, that we are able to just kind of slide over and park in an area where that thing keeps going. And it might be hard. It might be hard. We have to be a lot better at homesteading and gardening. We have to be a lot better at animal husbandry and raising our own children and building houses out of scratch and all that kind of stuff. But that we feel that sense of peace and joy, that we know that whoever encroaches on us, we have a strategy to combat them without violence and just be like, no, we're doing our own thing, man. We opted out. We meant it in our hearts. We opted out. We didn't want what you have. I don't want a loan from the bank. I don't want a new iPhone. I don't want a new fast car. I don't want to watch football. Sorry, I'm opting out. Please leave me alone. My hope is maybe not in our generation, but our children, our grandchildren, hopefully definitely our great-grandchildren, to be like, yeah, great-grandpa was right. We opted out. Go away. We don't use your banking system or your medicine system. We got our own. We don't need it. We just traded chicken for a fish and it's all good over here.
Heck yeah, man. Right on, Sean. God, I love you.
I love
seriously.
you too, man. I really hope. That's my hope. I believe that it's possible because I don't think that we're all here to just be, I tell people it's open air taxable prisons all around the world. And if you don't see it, it's just because it hurts too much to see it.
Yeah, totally. Gosh, what a great conversation. I am so grateful that we got
Yeah,
to
this is great.
hash this
I'm
out.
really glad you invited me.
Oh my
And I
God.
really am. I'm going to listen back to this and make notes, which I usually don't do, but I'm going to do it for this one. And I'll send you a bunch of links and stuff so that people have it, because
Yeah,
you can get Nikki's books for free right now. Like I said, it's really helpful and useful to her daughter if you're willing to donate. You can even send her money on Cash App and that type of stuff. I do that sometimes because if you're up short on a bill and you got 4 kids, it's nice if someone drop you $40 or whatever. But she intends to carry on the work. She intends to put the books back in print again. Her mother was an absolute juggernaut, and Nordica was kind of like the secret behind the scenes helper. She was the editor and producer behind the scenes of a lot of things. And so it's my hope that in the long run, as a group, we can continue like we always did. There's a bunch of us that have always supported them. And my plan is to continue that. I'm definitely going to send this to her because I know it'll make her happy. Because she lost her mom. Some people that's it. They're done.
yeah,
You
it's
can
huge.
you can resign yourself, and she didn't. She made it, and I want to encourage her not only that she can make it, but that we can keep the work available so people understand, because it clears the water, man. It takes the smoke back out of the air if you can really see why Nikki had a knee-jerk reaction in Seattle in the 90s, why she was willing to help her dumbass landlord who was just like a kind of a selfish dipsy-do slumlord. It's because she believed in what her dad taught her, that this is supposed to be bootstrap, independent American system, and they're taking it away. It's dissolving. It's going to be gone in the next 50 or 100 years, and I don't think there's anything we can do about it. But if we can understand it, then that's good enough. That's the same as not losing it, because the real American system's here.
Totally. Gosh, I agree with you so much on all this, and I appreciate all of it. And I look forward to the links. And before I let you go, can you just tell people again where they can find you if they want to reach out to you, if they maybe want to learn more about release coaching stuff and techniques, communitarianism, your art, your
Yeah,
music?
and I correspond with people all the time, so I'm glad to get messages. If you send me a message on any one platform and I don't respond, either just try another one or go to my website and send me an email. It's sbalger.com. It's kind of out of date right now, like I need to update it and I just haven't done it yet. So there's some stuff there that might be a little bit stale and not 100% accurate. I make art and sell it. I was doing commissions for people, but I'm pretty caught up in this big mold making project that I'm doing right now. And so that's taken a lot of my time. But you can catch me every Saturday night, most of the time, on Weaving Spiders Welcome, on the Weaving Spiders Webs channel with Jim Maiden and Alan Marcus and people like Michelle and Mario and whoever else pops up. We also do a stream on Wednesday evenings. Back in the day when we were doing RX Only Picture Show, Jim brought this idea into our show that he'd learned from college, where the students in school would read out loud while everyone sculpted in class. And it was actually like a credit, like a class in college where you would take turns reading out loud and people would sculpt, and they called it something like that, reading and sculpting. So we do a show where Jim decided to bring that to a standalone show called Flow State every Wednesday, and everyone makes art all at the same time, and everybody brings some piece of literature or a book or a poem or whatever to read. Sometimes we get off track, but that's fun too. So if you're an artist or you just like people making art, you can come check us out on Flow State, and it's the same channel on the Weaving Spiders Webs. And other than that, I don't know. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm a social media junkie to the max. So, come find me anywhere and I'll reply if I see it. And if not, just try the next DM box and I'll see it eventually.
Yes, thank you. And I have not been on a weave in a while, but it's coming. I'm feeling it. It's coming.
Yeah.
I'll be back, and I just love all you guys, and I'm so appreciative of this. Here's the word, community, because
yeah, it's a real community.
It is real, man. It's solid. I have learned so much. People are so supportive, and I feel like there's support that is just vibing back and forth and pinging off of all of these people. And I just really am so grateful. And I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful we got to meet each other in person. And
it's going to happen again. Don't worry. The stars will align and we're going to hang out. Oh, and I got one last idea for you. So here's
yes.
I've got like a sneaky part of my nature. I call it my road side. My dad's family was rich people, and there were the roads. And so my roads heart says what we should do is whenever we find a real community, start calling ourselves communitarians and acting like we're communitarians. And then when we get to the brass tacks of the meetings, we can say, oh no, we don't want to do any of this stuff. We're doing real communitarianism where we're not fronting, we're not faking, we're not lying. We actually mean it. And the most important thing is autonomy and individual rights, because we're only individuals. You can't be two people. You can only be one person, you know? So I wanted to leave you with that, because I've always thought that would be hilarious to say, no, we're the communitarians, not you. It's us.
Yeah, man. Invert it back at them, man. Throw it back at them. You have to. And you have to have fun with this stuff too. And you have to, there's a time to be serious, obviously, but there's also, you just have to remember to like be able to blend the fun and the seriousness, and to know that, we are in control. And so no matter what kind of stuff they throw at us, or laws or regulations or whatever, you're still in charge of this, and they can kind of do whatever they want to try and take that away from you, but they can't. They never can. They never will, because it's just how we're built. It's how we are put here in this realm. And so, it's
if you don't want to play the shell game, then don't put your money down right there.
Oh, man.
Anyways, thanks so much, Michelle. I really appreciate it. You're doing wonderful. I'm so glad that you stepped out and did this. You look great. Your hair is beautiful. Your show and your whole business and everything. I still have been using up. I'm going to run out of the stuff that you sent me. I mean, I'm out of the tinctures, but the balm, the healing balm, I still use it. And it's great stuff. So, if people aren't buying your products, then they're just missing out. That's their loss. They need to sign up for the newsletter and get their wallet out. So I'm going to leave you with that.
Aw, thanks, man. I appreciate it. It feels good. It really does. It feels good to be stepping out into this place, this platform, and I feel it in my bones and my heart. And so
I'm excited to catch up on more episodes. I think I've only watched 2, but to me that's good, because it's like a savings account I have. When the time comes, like, I've got episodes of Michelle's Healing Home I can listen to.
Nice. Well, it's awesome. I've even got a buddy that I talk to that I've known since like first grade, and we don't talk that often, but he just started going through episodes, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is so great. Like, a lot of the stuff you're talking about is over my head, but it's just cool," because he's learning more. So it's like people who are they're curious about certain things, but they don't know like everything about it. I mean, that's the whole goal with this, is just to kind of help people start connecting more dots and stuff and whatever. So it was really cool to hear that, people who aren't even necessarily into the same things that we're into, they're listening. And that's cool to me. And so that's a big,
you'll see. It's a mind-blowing trip as time goes on, because believe me, there's people who have come to me in the private messages and or in person or whatever, and they're like, you and Jim did this stuff, and because of that, this stuff changed. And you're just like, what? But that's what we're here for. You never know which little piece of what we might have said or what you said on some other episode could be the life-changing pivot moment for somebody, or that aha, that light comes on and you go, oh, I can live my whole life different now. And it's just that simple. And that's why I'm so glad that you did it. So,
well, thank you, my friend. And with that, I'm going to let you go. And anyone who wants to stick around for some updates, you're welcome to. But yeah, we're going to say good night to SB. And thank you again, my friend. Much love.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon.
Yep. Take care. Thank you so much, Michelle.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Good night. All righty, y'all. Thanks for hanging in there with us. That was a great episode. Great conversation, as always, with Sean. Gosh, I'm so happy to have had him, and just to be able to riff on this topic that, it's not something I think about like every single day or whatever, but when I'm reminded of stuff like this, it really it pings me to want to talk about this to more people, because it's really important. And it's important that people start learning this stuff and see what they can do with it, and they can take away what they will and go with the flow with it. So I've got slides for you guys for some updates as usual. Bring these up for you. So next week, and thank you to everybody in the chat. I've been trying to get better with paying attention to the chat, but also paying attention to the conversation going on. So I'm feeling myself being able to flow a little bit in and out of the chat a little bit more. So I'm seeing you guys, and thank you so much for being here. And I'm glad you guys are liking it. So for next week, we have Kaylee Bracana. Yay. She's going to come on, and we're going to talk astrology. So I'm going to pick her brain about certain questions I have with astrology. She's going to talk about her process and what she does with reading charts, and her knowledge base is very vast. So I'm very excited to talk with Kaylee next week. And just a little reminder, So next week's show is at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit with you guys. So if you can't make it, obviously that's totally fine. But we're going to meet up a little earlier to just kind of, so I can talk with Kaylee. And that's one of the things that I'm like totally okay with on this show. If somebody like can't meet me at 4, but I still want to go live, I will be able to like shuffle stuff around. So anyway, next week at 11 a.m., me and Kaylee will be talking on Valentine's Day. Just another announcement that I have a Patreon page now. So if you are not interested in, getting any herbal products or whatever, but you still want to throw me maybe some funds for a cup of tea or something here or there, you can find me on patreon.com/thehealinghome. All the patrons will have access to my last Thursday live stream, which is going to take place on the last Thursday of each month. And you're going to be we're going to just talk about stuff. So that'll be your opportunity to maybe pick my brain about something specific. If you have questions, we can do that. I also have some ideas for presentations to do on the last Thursday. That will be just for patrons. And then also the other thing that patrons will have is I will announce my full moon offering to all the patrons a few days earlier than everyone else. And you'll also get the option to be added to a wait list if you want to purchase a product before anyone else knows what the offering is. All patrons will know first. Full moon offering this month was just released on the 5th. And it is my horseradish fire cider. I'm so excited to share this one. Oh my goodness, it's delicious. If you like horseradish, you must like horseradish to like this fire cider, though, because that is one of the main ingredients. It's horseradish that we grew in our garden. It is just so delicious. I love drinking it straight on ice. It's really good. That might sound weird to people, but it's really good over ice. It's good. Just you can mix it in, make it into a salad dressing. You can make other condiments with it. You can add it to hot water and honey to make a tea. It's really glorious. And it helped me through a little bit of a detox session that I had last week. It was one of the remedies that I was hitting that stuff pretty hard when I wasn't feeling too good. And the other thing that I took while I wasn't feeling good, and I have to give them a shout out, grounded extracts, baby. Oh my goodness. Your remedies have seriously been such powerful allies for me. And I have been using the best earth, and it's awesome. And it's been helping me a lot with specifically coffee. Been trying to wean myself off of coffee a little bit more, have more of just like a more friendly relationship with coffee where I'm only having it like maybe once or twice a week. And I will say the best earth has really helped me with that. And it also helped me just process some emotions that I was going through with the detox that came on. And boy, oh boy, that stuff is great. So check out Grounded Extracts if you guys haven't already. Here is my menu. One change here. I am currently out of the Comfrey Nettle and Pine shampoo bars. I just sold the rest of them today. So those are not going to be available again for another month. But I will be having also, which isn't on the list, my CBD cannabis and white willow bark salve. I'm going to be making a batch of that on Thursday. And so I will be having a brand new batch of that for y'all. But for anyone who's not looking or watching the screen, let's see, the CBD body butter, CBD whip. I would highly recommend giving that a try if you're curious about it. I've only got one jar left of that. So hit me up if you want any of these products. You can email me, michelleshealinghome@gmail.com, michelleshealinghome.com. You can also text me 503-568-1569. I am available for consultations as well, and you can learn more about that on my website. Last but certainly not least, Mario is going to be doing a live stream this Friday at 12 p.m. noon Pacific time, and it is entitled The Magician's Wand. I'm very excited that he is jumping into this live stream stuff and really going for it. And this is going to be a good one. So this Friday, Mario will be getting into wand symbolism and why it's perfectly paired with the mercurial nature of the magician. He'll decode the magician through the symbolic lens of the polar tradition and discuss why it's an important consideration when learning the deepest, most sacred aspects of this card. So I'm very excited for him to be given this presentation. So you can find him. That'll be on Symbolic Studies YouTube channel. So you can check that out if you want to. Otherwise, you can go find him on Instagram as well. And he is also, I think, on Twitter and Facebook. But all of his live streams and most video content is always going to be up on his YouTube. So with all of that, you guys, I will say goodnight. Thank you again for coming and listening. I really loved this. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to just continue to follow this rabbit hole. It was such a great reminder of what's going on with all this stuff. So anyway, with all of that, happy Tuesday. I hope you guys are all doing well. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for being great and sharing your opinions in the chat. I really love to hear what you guys have to say and what you guys all think. So until the next one, we'll see you next week at 11 a.m. with Kaylee Burkana. Take care.